So this is a continuation from my previous video, which involves going from inspection, which is what we did on our previous video, whereby inspecting, which means which number represents the variable that will make this particular equation to be true, which means that will give me the one number after the equal sign that is always present there. And what we figured from our previous video is that yes, n has to be, in this case, by testing all the numbers on the number line and by looking at the other end of that particular side of the equation sign that says that, hey, 4 must be taken away from a very big number to give me 10, which means what will n be to make n divided by 2 to give me a number that is bigger than 4, and that will result in some number that will help me get to some big number, which is a positive big number. And what we figured was that 28 works after trying 20, 24, 26, and in here we tried n to be equal to 7, and we figured that on this other question, yes, it works for it to actually go through 10. So this is actually how we were able to use inspection to get to our answer. But the other part here is by using an undo method. And an undo method means that you're reading the equation logically from left to right using the variable to get to our final answer, but then from the final answer you're doing the opposite of the operation. So from what we talked about in our previous classes together, we know that however operations that we actually came to the conclusion that the opposite of addition, take note, is in this case subtraction. So wherever you go, either from left to right or from right to left with the equal sign, you should always know the opposite of an operation. And in this case, for multiplication, the opposite of multiplication is division. And in the other part here, when we talked about powers, in this case, if we have a number that is squared, the opposite of that is the square root, and you perform the square root of that same number. So these are the key tools that you need to keep in mind when going from one side of the equal sign to the other side of the equal sign. And we're going to apply this to this particular question in here, which says a number, which we're going to state it first for we to have an idea on what is being transferred, what operation is involved here. And what we see is that first we have to start with n, and then we perform division, divide by 2, and then next step is minus 4, and that will give me 10. So this is a logical way of reading it to get to 10. Now, to go the opposite way to figure out what n is, which is our end goal is to get 10 n, but we start at beginning at 10. What are we going to do? So what we're going to do first is we are going to go in the reverse direction, reading from backwards using the inverse operation. So for subtraction, we're going to do addition. We're going to add 4 to our number, which is 10. And then our next step here is we have division, but this time we're going to be doing multiplication, multiplied by 2, and that will give us what n is as our answer. So how we're going to execute this? So to execute it, what we're going to do first is you're going to start with 10. You're going to have 10 plus 4. That will give you what? 14. And then from 14, the next step is you multiply by 2, and that will give you 28. So yes, we actually figured out what our specific n has to be. So we figured out that n indeed has to be equal to 28, or this particular equation here to be true. And to confirm by checking, you can actually put this n by checking. Let me just write it here. By checking, we can put n to be equal to 28 in our equation. So n where we see n, we put 28. So it means 28 divided by 2. And take note here that we have to do subtract or minus 4. And so what we have is that 28 divided by 2, that gives us 14. 14 minus 4, that will give you 10. And so yes, n has to be equal to 28 indeed for our specific equation here to be true. So remember this skill. This skill is really handy. It comes really handy, and it's really important to keep that in mind. And another way is, how about you're given this question here and you want to figure it out. So in here, remember, as always, we want to start with n, and we want to look at what operation we are doing to n to get to the final goal, which is 10. So in this case here, what we're doing is we are multiplying n by 2, which is what we see right here. And then we get an answer, and then we subtract that answer minus 4, and then we get 10. So once we have this, we are going to do the opposite, which means we're going to start at 10 and we are going to get to n, which means we're going to do the opposite we're going to go in the opposite direction, doing the inverse operation, which means starting off with the following, which is in this case -4. We're going to add 4, we get a number, and then the next step is for multiplication. We're going to perform division, divide our answer by 2, and that gives us n. And so let's see to confirm by performing this particular step right here, starting with 10. And so starting with 10, we're going to have 10 plus 4. That is what we have here. That gives you 14. And then from 14, we divide 14 by 2, which is division. And what we have is 7. And so n has to be equal to 7 for this particular expression here to be true. And that actually is what we did right here by inspecting, and we figured out the answer through inspecting. But in here, by undo method, we figure out what n is, and it is indeed equal to 7. And if you want to check to confirm, what you have to do as always is you just go through the check method, which means where I see n, I put 7, and then we subtract 4, which means 2 times 7, that gives you 14. 14 minus 4, that gives you 10. And so this is a wonderful way to go about this, to figure out the particular operations. Now, there are other ways to go about this same undo method, and the other way is by, going through a particular method that we talked about as well in class. So if we start off with the same question, but in this case here, let's start off with the 2n, in this case minus 4 is equal to 10. And so take note that we are going to write the same equation, 2n minus 4, and this is, take note, equal to 10. And we know that by inverse operation, like what we did here, we have to first do what? We're going to add 4. So that is the first step. So in here, we're going to add 4 to both sides, which means that we are going to put plus 4 here and plus 4 here. And what will be our answer? If you have -4 plus 4, because they are like terms, -4 plus 4 gives you 0. So that means that we are left with, on the left side of this equal sign, we are left with 2n. And so once we have our 2n that is left on the left side, on the right side, we have 10 minus 4. That gives you 6. And in this case here, once you have that, we can then perform the next step, which is what? Division, because that is what we considered right here. We have to do division in this particular step right here. If we divide this by 2, let's see what number, oh sorry, that is not 6, it is 14. 10 plus 4 gives you 14. I apologize, it's 14 right here. And so once you have 12 or 2n, which means that we're going to be dividing both sides by 2, that is what we're going to have right here. Divide by 2 and divide by 2, or you can write 2n divided by 2, and it is equal to 4 divided by 2. So on this side, 2 divided by 2 gives you 1, which means we are left with n. And then on the right side, we have 4 divided by 2, which gives you 7. And so this is another way to go about solving this same solution right here in this particular method of question that is given right here. So I hope you found this really interesting and informative. Please make sure that you do the remaining questions, which is starting from question 9 all the way, in this case here, according to what I have here, we have all the way to question 17. And for the other questions from 19 to question 26, you can play with that on your own, but make sure you hand in once you complete question 17 all the way upwards. That means page 1 and page 2. So please hit the comment down below. Let me hear your thoughts. Make sure you also complete the specific practice activities that is under the video on your Power Workspace. That way you won't miss out on this particular interesting concept involving equations and how to not only check what the value for that particular variable is in an equation, but also how to collect like terms, and also how to evaluate by inspecting, and also by doing undoing method. All the same, stay smart as always and believe in yourselves.